next speaker is Dr. Alok Dan from the Singapore University of Technology and Design in Singapore. So he is a postdoctoral fellow at the Product Development Pillar, and his research interest includes physical and failure analysis of emerging materials and nanoscale devices using scanning probe. Actually, we have the community working in this field knows well Alok because he has been very productive in the previous years. And the title of his presentation today is Conduction Atomic Force Microscopy for Gate Dielectric Reliability Analysis. So welcome Alok, and thank you very much for being here. You can start when you want.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting, and it has been a pleasure listening to all the speakers. So in this talk, actually, let me share my screen. Right. So in this talk, actually, what I will be sharing is some of the efforts we have been doing towards the gate dielectric reliability analysis using conduction atomic force microscopy. So before I start the talk, I would like to acknowledge my mentors, Dr. Shonu Shia, Professor Pei, Professor Michael Bosman, and Professor Nagarajan Raghavan at Singapore. And there are many excellent collaborators and colleagues without whom this work wouldn't be simply possible. So in this talk, basically what I will do is first go through briefly on some of the key points about the gate dielectrics and why it's relevant. And again, how conduction atomic force microscopy helps to understand some aspects of gate dielectric breakdown. And then I will take two case studies, one using the defect nanospectroscopy in gate dielectrics, and the second one using CFM to decode the dielectric breakdown mechanism in 2D hexagonal boron nitride. So first few slides are just to introduce what I mean by gate dielectric. So in this slide, what I'm showing is a basic transistor structure. And if you look at it, there is a very tiny region called dielectric, which is just underneath the gate one. And this is the region it is called, named as gate dielectric, which is just around a few nanometers thick. And what we are looking into is the reliability of this ultra thin dielectric actually. So like a human body, this gate dielectric is the heart of a transistor. And once this gate dielectric fails, the transistor simply cannot operate. And that's why it's so essential to understand the reliability of this very ultra thin region. While doing nanoscale measurement, sometimes we just forget what does actually nanoscale mean. So I just pulled out this slide to give a view, the whole range length scale that we talk about. So you can simply see that when I'm talking about the transistor, we are in sort of tens of nanometer range actually. The most recent transistors are already going beneath 10 nanometer length scale. And the good thing about the AFM is that the AFM can almost exclusively, it's like an exclusive method which can give the access to the whole range of this length scale, starting from angstrom all the way to the hundreds of micrometer length scales. So just to give you an idea about the transistor, as the time has progressed, we have slowly moved from the planar to the FinFET to the gate dielectric to the gate all around FETs. But the basic structure architecture remains the same. So essentially we still have gate dielectric embedded between the gate and the channel, all the way from the planar to the gate all around. So just to give you an idea what I mean by gate, so as we have scaled down the transistor, changed the architectures, there has been changes in the gate dielectric materials. For example, we started with silicon oxide, a low K dielectric, progressively moved to silicon oxynitride, then with a high K dielectric like high K. And even there are recent discussion that for post silicon electronics, for example, graphene-based electronics, we have to even move to 2D dielectrics. So as like any material, dielectrics are also prone to degradation and breakdown. So this slide is just to give an idea that when a transistor operates, the dielectric, the gate dielectric, undergoes through various stages of degradation. So what you can see here that the first stage is so-called stress-induced leakage current, where the defects are generated randomly throughout the device. And once the sufficient number of defects are created, a percolation path, which is a chain of defects connecting the top electrode and the bottom electrode, is formed, at which we have a soft breakdown. And then we see some sort of, when we have a sort of random telegraph noise, and as more and more defects are created, this percolation path basically widens. And finally, we have a hard breakdown when the dielectric simply fails to operate, when the transistor simply fails to operate. So why AFM is in picture? Because all the phenomena, if you look at, for example, defect generation, dielectric breakdown, and all these microstructures, they are all nanoscale phenomena. So if one just want to understand from the standard transistor level, transistor structure devices or capacitor structure devices, it can't be measured. For example, look at the picture of atomic defects. When these defects are created, these are essentially a nanometer or atomic length scale phenomena. And they require atomic scale resolution to probe them directly. Simply like also breakdown, which is also tens of nanometer length scale phenomena. And again, looking at the microstructure, you can see that, for example, grain and grain boundaries. For example, if someone wants to understand how the grain and the grain boundaries conductivity varies, we need to have some probe which can measure at this spatial resolution. And that is the reason conduction atomic force microscopy is so important to understand and answer some of these questions. So this slide is just to give you an idea that how we typically do measurements when we are dealing with very thin dielectrics. So essentially, we have a ultra thin dielectric located on either on a metal substrate or a highly doped silicon substrate. The substrate is one of the electrodes, and the conductive, and we use a conductive AFM tip. And one can actually control the force that one applies during all the electrical measurements. And then we have an AFM setup, an electrical setup, which can measure and sense the currents actually. So coming back to the problem of conduction AFM, two things which are very important when we talk about the AFM probe is first the probe dimension, because it literally determines what will be our contact area for all the AFM measurements. So you can see actually pretty much what we have found in our experiment that few tips work nicely and we can get reliable results. For example, with diamond coated tips and also metal wire rivers. For example, platinum iridium wire levers or platinum wire rivers. They last long actually and can give reliable data. And again, sometimes we can also use coated tips, but these are not so reliable and they wear out pretty quickly actually. The second parameter, which is pretty important, is the stiffness or the Ford constant of the cantilever. So this actually determines that how much force we can apply between the tip and the surface when we do our measurements. And it's inversely also related to the area of the tip. So as cantilever can be simply thought as a spring, and essentially we have a tip connected at the end. And with commercial AFM probes available, one can go and simply pick up cantilevers between piconewton and micronewtons forces. So it is possible to do electrical measurements within this whole range of forces, ranging from a piconewton to micronewtons, which is almost like 6 orders of magnitude. So in the first case study, I will a little bit talk about the application of AFM to do defect nanospectroscopy. In simple words, it means measuring random telegraph noise at the nanoscale. So let me talk a little bit about the problem. So what happens that when we have a dielectric, essentially we have intrinsic defects, or even the defects can be created when a transistor operates, like stress-induced defects. When these defects are created, for example, what they do is, so you can see in the energy band diagram, they essentially create energy levels. And the electrons, which is actually flowing through these energy levels, they can give rise to threshold voltage instability. And depending on how many defects we created, you can see that the threshold voltage can change by corresponding number of levels. So for example, if we have one if we have created one defect, it will give rise to 2 levels of threshold voltage shift. Similarly, as one goes on, for example, 3 number of trap is 3, we get 8 levels actually. And this is a pretty serious problem as we scale down the devices. And one important perspective is to understand that what kind of defects we are created. And from physics point of view, it's very interesting because one can go and probe these single defects at atomic length scale. So given the AFM is, the tip is pretty sharp, nanoscale, one can simply think that, okay, why not choose an AFM tip, go and do electrical characterization. That's the whole idea, because it allows to have a spatial resolution down to tens to hundreds of nanometer square. And simply because we have a smaller tip, we can bring down the overall current to a very small scale. And the good thing is, once we scale down the area, the effect of these individual traps is very dominant. So it helps to decode, understand the role of these individual defects in the current signals actually. And because of the smaller current, we also are able to get high signal to noise ratio because of this noise contribution from the defects. So far so good. The story looks simple, but it's not simple as it looks. The challenge is most of the measurements are done in the room temperature, and as the measurements are carried out, one wants to sit over a location, because you can, if I go back to this slide, what it means that one has to just stay over a point, measure over a function of time. Because our tip is ultra sharp, what happens at room temperature, the variation in temperature leads to thermal expansion of the component of the microscope, and simply as time progresses, the tip will move away from the location. So this is essentially shown in this current map actually. So what you see there, that we have a breakdown spot in the dielectric. We are measuring current as time process, we can slowly see that the current is moving down. In fact, there are some papers, if you go through it, you will find that people even try to correlate with some sort of recovery, but it's not really a recovery. It's essentially because the tip is moving, drifting away from the area of high regions of conduction spots. And particularly, it's very important because in a dielectric, when we create high regions of high conductivity, the nearby regions are insulating. So as the probe moves from the regions of high conductivity towards the insulator, the current will drop. And one can simply confuse that it might be a recovery, but it's not. So we have been trying to look at this problem for quite some time because our interest was to measure actually the RTN signals at the nanoscale. So what we found that we tried with a lot of tips, and this the long story short, what we found that there are few things which can be controlled to improve the time scale over which we can stay over a point. So what you are seeing is a simple mechanical equation, a spring constant equation actually. So essentially, this gives the delta x is the kind of the distance before which the slip occurs. So you can see that one can simply improve this delta x by applying a higher force. It means that over a cantilever, we can apply a higher force and we can stay a long time before actually the lateral force becomes dominant enough of the friction force and the slip happens. And another way is actually to use a very soft cantilever. So if K effective stiffness is low, that can also improve the drift actually. So that provides a window actually. The higher force is not desirable because in gate dielectrics, if we apply higher force, we effectively are creating defects because of the mechanical stress. So the idea was to use very soft cantilevers and try to affect this. See this effect. So what you are seeing actually here, what we were doing is simple experiment, creating a breakdown spot, measuring the current over time, and also we were measuring the lateral force. So you can nicely see that there is a correlated effect between the lateral force and the current. So what you are seeing at this point, that tip has actually drifted away from the breakdown spot and it has moved to the nearby insulating region, and you can see that the correlated effect, that the current has also dropped down. So the lateral force and the current signals are strongly correlated. and there is an interplay between the lateral forces of the cantilever and the dwell time. So we tried with different types of cantilever, ranging from very soft all the way to the very stiff cantilevers. And what we found that the effective stiffness largely determines the dwell time of the sleep happens. If the force are reasonably the same for all the tips, the spring constant largely determines the dwell time. Again, one can also go and create very blunt tips, but that's not effectively what we measure, because what we want is ultra sharp tip which can measure these probes. So for this kind of time dependent measurement, we recommend that one can use actually ultra soft kind of tip so that it provides a longer time window before the sleep happens. So once we established the setup, then we went to measure some random telegraph noise. So in this setup, what we have changed little bit is we have connected externally a semiconductor parameter analyzer. The idea is because it provides an opportunity to have current compliance over a wide range of logarithmic scale. And again, we have connected a faster current amplifier, which helps to measure this, which helps to sample these current signals at a faster rate. So what we do in this experiment, I will show you some results. The idea was that we go over a location, measure the noise, and then we purposely create the defects there in various stages by controlling the current compliance and keep measuring the noise. So that is how we try to understand how a defect basically, once a defect is created, how the noise parameters are affected. So for all our measurements, we all the time do in ultra high vacuum, and sometimes it can be very, very slow measurements, because the ultra high vacuum measurements are simply so compared to like the ambient temperature measurements. So simply one has to deal with it. Again, what you are seeing here that we have an ALD HFO2 samples to start with. We don't see any kind of noise, and this is expected because ALD samples are known to have very low defect densities, and typically with a smaller area of the probe, we don't are able to pick up those defects. But as and when we are creating defects, one can see that the two-level sort of signal, and when we further stress, what we can see that the overall increase in the leakage current and also the time constant of the RTN changes as well. So this RTN strongly correlates that with the defect generation in HFO2 at the nanoscale. Again, one can go and do some very standard experiment which had been demonstrated at the device level. One can simply go and repeat at the nanoscale level. So the idea behind this measurement is that one can measure RTN signals as a function of different bias and extract the time constant, and then one can also find one can predict where the defect is located actually. So the technique is well established at the device level. So we demonstrate here that the same can be measured with an AFM tip as well. So what you see here that in this particular case, we can nicely do the measurements at various voltages, and we can extract the defect parameters. For example, in this case, the defect causing RTN is located very close to the AFM tip and HFO2 interface. So not only the standard RTN, one can also probe some non-equilibrium RTN. So this example, what you see that, so in earlier slide, if you look at the RTN, means it has well-defined two-level RTN. Here you also see we have two-level RTN, but there is quite a difference. So what you see that there is no RTN for some period of time, then we have a burst of RTN. And then again, we don't see a current fluctuation, and then we see a RTN. So what does actually it physically means that, so, assume that we have an oxygen vacancy defect and we have an interstitial oxygen vacancy defect. And this type of RTN simply emerges because of the interstitial neutral defect diffusion and its nanoscale electrostatic interaction with the oxygen vacancy defect. This means that this interstitial oxygen vacancy defect is simply diffusing away, moving to and fro between the electrostatic kind of a distance of this oxygen vacancy defect. Again, one can also observe multi-level RTN. We observe this multi-level RTN when after some soft breakdown, and you can actually see like because soft breakdown actually creates many defects, and one can go and look at this multi-defects, and we find that even in this particular case, we have up to 10 conduction levels. So if we go back to simple understanding of the RTN, this at least tells that we have more than 3 defects present at that conduction percolation path, which is modulating the overall charge transport. So this was one of the case studies we did for the defect spectroscopy. In the next case study, I will show some of the work that we have been doing on the hexagonal boron nitride. Well, hexagonal boron nitride is pretty new for the dielectric community. The whole idea comes because the 2D electronics overall comes into picture because it provides a higher channel mobility, and we have improved control on the channel, high on-off ratio. And that is the reason the community is moving towards kind of a 2D transistors actually. And so far, if you look at it, hexagonal boron nitride is the only dielectric which has proved to be quite compatible with the graphene electronics. It is because the lattice mismatch is pretty small. And again, there are many factors. For example, it's pretty much thermochemical stable, and it is mechanically kind of strong as well. So there is the motivation to look into the dielectric breakdown in sort of 2D dielectrics. So before I present the data, there are a lot of work which have been done even by Prof. Mario Lajan's group in the CVD grown HBM. In this particular work, what I will present is some of the recent work that we have been trying to do on the CVD grown multilayer HBM films. So typically these CVD grown HBM films are very important because the method allows to grow a kind of film over a very large area. And that's very important if one wants to commercialize it. For example, there have been already the people have already reported the wafer scale growth of 2D materials, for example, graphene. And now, if we want to use those graphene MOS2 kind of materials for the 2D nanoelectronics, one has to find a suitable dielectric. And HBN is comes very handy because it is known that it produces very low defect density. But so far, most of the work, if you look at it, most of the works are done using exfoliated HBN. It gives a high quality HBN, but again, these are very tiny areas, so it can't be commercially exploited. So that's why our intention was to look over the CVD grown HBN. And what we found that when these multi-layer HBN are grown using CVD methods, they have thickness inhomogeneity. So what you are seeing here, like the thickness varies over length scales actually over the, and then this is a very important reliability concern if one wants to use it for the transistors. So what we did in this work is to look into the breakdown. So in the first curve, what you are seeing is the IV characteristics breakdown performed both on CVD HBN as well as we compared it with the ultra flat, well-established SiO2 dielectric. So what you see that in HBN, wide variability in the breakdown voltage is observed. So when I say breakdown, I mean the voltage at which the sharp increase in the current is observed. While in case of SiO2, you can see that most of the IV curves are similar as expected because these oxide films are very homogeneous. And the effect of the result of this, the variation is that if we go and look at the breakdown statistics, we find that SiO2, which is kind of follows a monomodal Weibull distribution as expected. But when we use this kind of CVD grown multi-layer HBN films, these are no longer monomodal. We have kind of a multimodal breakdown distribution. And this is simply coming because we have a thickness variation in the film. But that's where the AFM part come into picture. So what it tells that, well, the material is not ready for commercialization, but it does not mean that one cannot understand the basic mechanism of the degradation and the breakdown. Because over very small length scale, even the HBN is still flat. And because essentially the AFM provides a very small kind of a spatial resolution at nanometer length scale. So for an AFM tip, the sample is essentially for a constant thickness actually. So one can go and simply understand all the breakdown mechanism. So what you are seeing here that when we are trying to understand the breakdown mechanism, in this particular slide, what I am showing here that when we take a HBN and try to apply multiple RBS by limiting the current compliance, you can see that the progressive degradation is happening. And this is very different actually compared to what we observed in conventional gate dielectric, because in conventional gate dielectrics, once we have a percolation path formed, it is always, the current is much higher, but it is suggestive that something different mechanism is going on. And even it is suggested that the HBN is most likely a 2D material, so it's a layer by layer breakdown actually happening. And that's why you see that a consistent shift in the IV curves as we stress it. Again, one can go and use the similar established techniques like noise nanospectroscopy that we just saw in HiK and try to understand what is happening. So what I am showing here is the RTN trends on a fresh as well as the post breakdown sample. So what you can see actually that we have a 2-level RTN present after electrical space. And what it means that there is a single defect modulating the charge transport. But when we do breakdown, what you can see that there are multi-level RTN patterns exactly. And this is because when we do soft breakdown, we have multiple defects near the percolation path. One can also go and probe like some exotic properties of the defects. For example, metastable defect. What it essentially means that a defect has two energetically favorable positions in the energy, and what it means that the defect will change its time constant over the given period of time. So you can see that over this small window, we have a 2-level RTN, and if I have just zoomed in these two regions, so what you can see that, well, the current levels are the same, but the time constant has actually changed. For example, in this first part of the portion, you can see that the current is almost like equally distributed, but in the second one, in the upper and the lower current state, but in the second part of the curve, you can see that the current almost exclusively remains in the low current state. And it is simply because now it is favoring some another energy state. And this can also observed in the time constant distribution, where we observed sort of bimodal distribution, which is also implying that we have a metastable defect present in the HBN. Also, one can use, for example, CAFM to understand the breakdown structural changes in soft breakdown. For example, we find that when soft breakdown happens in HBN, it creates a small pit actually. So what you are seeing here that I believe this is 100 nanoamp current compliance, and you can see a pit depth of around 2 to 3 nanometer. This is essentially very different from what we have been observing, say on SiO2 or hafnium dioxide breakdown, where instead of a removal of the material, we see that there is sort of hillock formed, and this is because the underlying silicon kinds of melt away and forms kinds of epitaxial layer grows below the dielectric, and that's why we have some sort of hump over this region. So in this context, actually, we were also interested to look at the hard breakdown region. Earlier work done by Hattori, for example, has shown that when we do hard breakdown, what hard breakdown means is like putting a higher current compliance, tens of microamps or more. They always see that the material is fractured and tens of microns kind of pit is formed. But most of these measurements were done in ambient. And again, the good thing about the ambient is the tapping mode can be used, which provides good enough resolution to look at all these phenomena. But since we were doing measurements in ultra high vacuum, we don't have so much flexibilities. And we were trying to use the other methods available, but they simply can't be used. For example, even frequency modulation mode, because there is a lot of debris coming out of this breakdown, and they make the frequency mode unstable. And therefore, we developed a new adhesion approach for the hard breakdown characterization. So in this mode, what we do is we use adhesion as an indicator what is happening on the surface. So the way the adhesion is measured is we bring the tip in close contact with the surface, and then we break the contact. And once what you will get is a force displacement curve, and this is the point where basically we are breaking the junction between the tip and the surface, and one can measure the adhesion. So we use this approach actually to measure the adhesion before breakdown and after breakdown, and then try to understand it. So what you are seeing here that we use both soft breakdown and hard breakdown condition. So in soft breakdown, what we saw that there is little bit increase in adhesion, and you can also see that increase in conductance, which is still a dielectric. You can see that the current is still exponentially increasing in the bias range. But when we do the hard breakdown, you can see that after breakdown, it's ohmic, because we underneath has a copper substrate, and the tip is now directly touching the copper, and the whole sort of HBN is removed. And this gives rise to a very high adhesion forces as well. This high adhesion force simply comes because we are working in ultra high vacuum, and now we have two metallic surfaces in contact, which is the wire lever, which is also metal, and we have a copper. And then it can be an indirect measurement to understand the hard breakdown actually, in addition to the usual topography map that one acquires. So we did some little bit of statistics, and what we found that in soft breakdown that we have mostly no pitting actually happening. And sometimes we do see pit, for example, 30% of the cases like a nanometer pits actually. But in hard breakdown, we do see that the whole material kind of blows away. And we have full pitting in most of the cases, and partial pitting in few as well. So based on the data, what we find that when we have a very low current compliance, like in the soft breakdown region, it can have no pitting, because simply we are creating the electrical defect. Or sometimes, depending on the nanostructure, the microstructure of the dielectric, as well as the hardness, we can observe sort of partial nano pitting, which is kind of the small amount of material removal. But when we apply like a very high current compliance, we simply find that the material simply blows away actually. So finally, coming to the conclusion, hope I have convinced you that AFM has again time and again proved to be an excellent metrology tool for the material characterization at the nanoscale. In particular, conduction AFM is highly useful to probe the electrical phenomena at the nanoscale. I have also provided 2 case studies where we have tried to understand the defect spectroscopy and also the dielectric breakdown in the high K materials as well as the emerging 2D dielectrics. There are various imaging and spectroscopy modes in AFM, which one can combine to get many useful information in addition to the conduction measurement. And again, there are a lot of opportunities available, which include hybrid AFM, like combining Raman PL, calorimetry, and also combining STM and AFM, which are kind of the emerging areas actually. With this, I will conclude the talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alok, for the very nice presentation. You have so many measurements and so much data. We have 3 questions. Actually, we got even one more now. Unfortunately, we don't have time to read all of them, so I will encourage the audience to send an email to Alok to ask all the questions. Here, I'm going to select one of them, okay?
Sure.
The first one says, are there any operating tricks to avoid thermal drift?
Sorry?
Are there any tricks that you could do with your settings of the AFM to try to avoid thermal drift?
Right. Actually, in imaging modes, like in typical electron microscopy, for example, in TEM and all those, they always use some sort of image correction actually. So like they acquire some sort of previous image and they have some feature, and by using some image algorithm, they can always trace back to some of the feature, and that is how they do it. The same can be implemented in AFM for the imaging mode, but for spectroscopy, unfortunately, no. There is no direct way to control the drift. Of course, one can go at the low temperature measurements. And for example, one can also use like a very soft levers to increase the dwell time, but there is no way to avoid the thermal drift. It will happen. It will simply happen.
Okay, there is another, we have time for another question. Let's read it quickly. So, let me see. So we have a question that says, to what extent the contact area and then the current density is considered in the statistic of pit, non-pit breakdown spot?
Right. So in that experiment, we were using platinum wire levers, I guess. So what we do all the time for our measurement is that we image the tip after break, after once the measurement is finished, we go and do the SEM image of the tip. So at least that gives us some idea that whether we got a blunt tip at the end of measurement or at least it's sharp. So the data what I was showing here, the tip still remains reasonably sharp. And that is what we can say actually, that one can simply not tell that what's happening, say like from one breakdown spot to another. That's a very tricky matter to tell, but one can understand that the area will simply remain the same because the tip is not changing a lot from one measurement to another, and it's reasonably sharp at the end of the measurement.
All right, yeah. So much, Alok. I think it's a pity we don't have more time for discussion, but we have other questions in the chat that I will make sure that are forwarded to you by email, okay?
Sure, Mario, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye.